Hey guys, it's Brooks here. So in one of my last videos, I walked through how to set up offline domain join with Workspace ONE. Offline domain join is a great way to deploy PCs in a little bit more modern way while still getting the benefits of the domain. Now, I showed you how to set that whole process up, but there was one piece that was missing, and that was the ability to log into the PC once it's offline domain join. The first problem was how do we offline domain join a PC itself, and the second was how do you actually log into the PC off the network. Right? With Active Directory, you have to have line of sight to a domain controller in order to do that first login. So to solve that problem, we have to have some sort of connectivity. So in this case, we're going to be using VMware Tunnel. VMware Tunnel is VMware's VPN application, and it provides per app, split tunnel, or even full device-based VPN. Now it works alongside the UAG, which is the Unified Access Gateway, and this appliance creates the tunnel essentially to your network. So we're going to walk through how to set up the UAG, how to configure and deploy Tunnel so that we can actually do the complete offline domain join process. This video is a little longer today because there's a lot more steps involved, but stick with me. I wanted to be super thorough on demonstrating everything that you need to set up this process end to end. All right, enough talking, let's get to it.
Okay, here we go. So let's start with deploying the OVF template. I've already downloaded it, so I'll be selecting it here as a local file. Renaming the virtual machine to bpep-uag. Selected my folder under servers. I'm selecting my cluster. And this will import the OVF and pull in the various steps that we'll need to complete the build. Okay, for configuration, I'm going to go ahead and do 2 NIC for now, although single NIC can also work. For storage, I'll select some available storage on my host. The SAS 10K looks good. I'll change it to thin provision, although honestly, this doesn't really matter. It's not that big of a VM. Okay, for management network, I will be selecting internal or private, actually, for backend and for management. Both select private, and then internet facing will be my public network. I have two networks on this vSphere environment. One obviously public, mapped to with internet connectivity, and then a private one where my domain controller lives and my domain. So I'll be configuring this UAG to have 1 NIC on private and 1 NIC on public and be able to route the traffic in between these networks. So IPv4 static, and I'll start to configure NIC number 1. Remember that NIC number 1 is actually the internet facing NIC in this particular scenario. So I will be using IP address on the internet facing one, and then NIC 2 is the internal one. So I want to make both of these static v4. All right, let's go ahead and look at my rough sketch of how this is designed on the network side. So on the left, you can see my private network with the 192.168.3.0 network space. My DC01 is providing both DNS and DHCP in that space, and that will be tied to NIC 2. UAG also has a NIC 1 tied to the public network, and that is on a 10.25.40.0 namespace, and that will be where my clients will be representing, quote, like internet facing or outside of the network clients. Important thing to note on the client side, on the public network, the client does have to resolve DNS for the UAG. DNS has to really work on kind of both sides of the network. So on that public one, I did create a DNS entry for my UAG, just named it bpep-uag.eng.vmware.com. It's just on a engineering kind of private network here. So created a static DNS entry for that with that IP 10.25.40.83. And then on the internal one, it will have an IP address of 192.168.3.149. So one note here, this DNS server address, actually I mistyped it when I first built this out. It needs to be the internal DNS, not the external DNS server. So the internal DNS on the backend side will be needs to be configured here. So in my case, it should have been 192.168.3.150. So I'll make this change later in the process down the road. So if you do make a mistake here, you can modify some of these values once the UAG is deployed. And I will name it bpepin-uag. Now I will be configuring password for the root user. And then setting the password just for my lab to not expire. And then this is the REST API user or the admin user. So I'll set the password for that account as well. I'll be logging into the web interface with this user. Then let's go ahead and enable SSH. And click Next and finish. And the OVF will be imported and deployed into vSphere. Okay, so now that the UAG is powered on, now what we're going to need to do is log in to the UAG's admin console. So we'll type in the internal IP address, so 3.149:9443/admin, and that will get us into the admin console. Keep in mind that you do have to obviously be on the internal or the management network for this to resolve. So I will type in my admin username and the password that I set during the OVF creation. So if we go into system configuration, we can scroll down and remember, as I said earlier, that we need to set the DNS to 192.168.3.150. So I've actually gone ahead and changed this already, but just remember that this needs to be the DNS server of the internal network so that when a client makes a request, such as, to the domain controller or an internal server, for example, dc.modern-peak.com, in my example here, the client will talk to the external NIC first on the UAG, then it will pass it to the internal NIC and do the internal lookup against that record there, and then resolve the IP. So this is what needs to be set there in order for that to happen properly. And then I need to actually also add my DNS search here as well. We'll go ahead and save that. Then if we look in network settings, we can just verify that both our NICs are set correctly. All right, so now we have to create an admin role in UEM for essentially a REST API account in order for UEM to talk to the UAG. So we'll go into Account, Administrator's Role, and we'll create a new one called Tunnel UAG or whatever you'd like to call it. So I've named mine Tunnel API Role. On the left side, click on API, and then on the right side, type in Enter to resolve REST Enterprise Integration and just select Read for that item, and then save. And then we have to create a REST API Administrator account, which is just a basic account, although it can also be directory. That will be used to do the authentication and communication with the UAG. So I'll name mine tunnel_UAG. I'll set a password. And then under roles, I'll go ahead and select the organization group. In my case, it's the top, Modern Peak LLC, and then the role that we just created, Tunnel API role, and save. Actually, it looks like the admin account name already exists in my tenant, so let me just adjust that really quick. All right, and then there we go. So now we can take that account information and put it into the tunnel settings. So first we'll set the API server URL, which is just going to be https://AS, which stands for API server, the number of your tenant. In my case, it's 1506.awmdm.com. Then we'll enter in that API server username, so the account we just created, the account's password, the organization group, which if you just hover over the OG, you can see the group ID there. So we'll type that in, Modern Peak. And then the tunnel server host name. So this is bpep-uag. If there's anything else in here that you need to configure, such as proxies, you can do that in this place as well. All right, so now we need to actually enable one more thing. So we'll go to Settings, Advanced API, and ensure that REST API is enabled. Okay, so if we go back to tunnel configuration under groups and settings configurations tunnel, we can now set our tunnel configuration. So for hostname, it will be bpep-uag, port 8443, and then we'll go ahead and save that. Both UEM and the UAG should be able to talk to one another. And if we refresh, we can see that, yep, in fact, it is now green. This sometimes can take a little while, so be patient. Check back after a few minutes if it still hasn't connected. And then sometimes you may need to troubleshoot whether you typed in the correct password or not, or have the URL wrong or anything like that. So in my case, it took maybe 5 to 10 minutes for that green to show up properly. Now that we have the connectivity, we need to set up some device traffic rules. So go ahead and edit those. Click on Manage Applications and Add. And we're going to add a few applications on Windows so that the first time login to the domain to support offline domain join can work properly. So this first one will be System. App type is Desktop, and the app identifier is just System. Then we'll create another one called SVC host. And the path under C Windows System 32, svc host.exe. Then we'll add another one for lsas.exe. This is the really important one for doing the authentication and logging in. And this is under System 32 as well, lsas.exe. And we have one final one, which is kind of optional for logging in, but it's nice to do anyways, is Windows Explorer. Okay, now that we've added our managed applications, let's go ahead and add a rule. So the first rule, we're going to select all 4 of those items. And then the action will be tunnel, and the destination is going to be star.modern-peak.com. So any of those applications that attempt to access an internal domain resource will be automatically tunneled through the UAG. And now we actually have to create a device profile for VPN as well. So go ahead and name it whatever you'd like. And we'll want to make sure that this assignment type is set to auto. And then smart groups, You can certainly do this as a smaller group for testing, but generally I recommend all Windows 10 because you want to make sure all devices have this. And if you're, for example, enrolling as a provisioning user or staging user, and then a new user logs in, you want to make sure that this profile is assigned to both of those users so that it doesn't automatically get removed. All right, let's go to VPN on the left and configure. Select connection type, Workspace ONE Tunnel. Device traffic rules are going to use those default ones we just created. You can obviously make new and additional traffic rules just for different applications as well, but for now I'm just using the default. And then under custom configuration, we do need to add one thing, and this is to enable Pre-Logon VPN. So we're going to add that start tunnel pre-logon and set it to true. And then for trusted network detection, this is for the client to detect if it's on the internal network, not off the network, but on the network. Then the VPN doesn't need to be running and tunneling that traffic. So in my case, it's just the modern-peak.com domain. And then enhanced domain resolution I have enabled. Okay, looks good. So let's go ahead and save and publish. And there we go. And the final piece is to create the VMware Tunnel app. I've already uploaded this. Go ahead and grab the latest one from my VMware or my Workspace ONE. And for the uninstall command, you can see it there on the screen. You're welcome to pause at any point. For deployment options, set it to device and admin privileges yes. And there's the install command. And then install timeout I reduced it down to 10. One final note on this page though, for testing, you can leave it to say do not restart, because what we're going to be doing is enrolling into that staging user to get the offline domain join profile. We are going to go ahead and reboot after. So essentially we'll get the offline domain join. We're going to get these profiles. We're going to get the tunnel application installed, and then we're going to reboot, and then we'll log into the domain. So that in this case, it's fine because we are doing a reboot automatically, but normally Tunnel has to have a reboot just because of a driver that it installs. So if you're doing this at wide scale and production, you're going to want to use the user install deferral option there and then set a reboot code. So that way, if a person is actually using their PC and they get this deployed, they can set when they want to reboot, and then it will have minimal interruption for them because this does require reboot for it to work properly. So just a little bit of a side note there before we continue. And then at the bottom here, I've done the install detection criteria, and I've set it to the app exists. That GUID there is the GUID, the Windows System MSI GUID for the VMware Tunnel installer, and in my case, it's for version 2.1. It's important to do this and set this app exists as the GUID, so that way you have version control, so you can add new versions of Tunnel later on down the road and push it and upgrade it to your clients. Okay, normally it'd be a good idea to add an icon. I haven't done this in my case just for demo purposes. And then let's go ahead and create an assignment. So I do have one already here for provisioning account, but I need to make sure that I have it assigned to the final user that will be logging in. So for now, I'm just going to set it to all Windows 10 devices. And set the app delivery to auto. And then make app MDM managed if the user has installed it. It's always a good idea to check that. And then I'll set that to be the first priority. All right, and there we go. So now let's flip over to our client. As you can see, I've already gone ahead and installed the Intelligent Hub. We're going to go through the UI this time and just enroll to our provisioning account instead of via the command line. This is the same account that I created in the offline domain join profile, so check out that other video for more information on how to get this whole process set up and for the offline domain join piece. All right, so I've enrolled now successfully, and I can see VMware Tunnel client is automatically downloading and installing for me. All right, and it's installed. So let's flip back over to the console. Here is that device. If I refresh, I can see that Tunnel is installed. The tunnel profile is successfully installed. If I check troubleshooting and commands, I want to make sure there's no commands in the queue. Looks good. If we go to HKLM, software, VMware Inc., VMware Tunnel, and refresh, I can see and take a look at the tunnel configuration. That looks correct, what I configured properly in UEM. And if I do custom configuration, I can validate that the Pre-Logon VPN is set to true. So that all looks good. And then one final check, we'll just make sure that the offline domain join process has completed, and looks like it has. So I'll just load up a command prompt and show that I can't actually talk to my domain right now, my DC. I'm off the network. And so this will show and demonstrate how the tunnel will go ahead and fire up and allow us to log in. So let's give it a restart. And here we go. We're at the login screen. So I will go ahead and authenticate, log in with my domain user, haven't been logged in before, and boom, there we go. I can connect and log in. Double click on the hub and just validate that I'm now logged in and enrolled to my directory account. There I am, bpepin at modernpeak.com. It automatically flipped over to my domain account and allowed me to log in. Tunnel automatically fired up in the background at that login screen.
Man, how cool is that? We can fully deploy a PC, still join to the domain completely off network. I think that's really cool. Thanks for sticking with me if you made it this far. If you found it helpful, please like, comment, and subscribe. And also, I will link below a few more blogs and documentation that really helped me with this process, so definitely check those out in the description below. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.